Did I really win the Edward R. Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award, where I'm on par with journalists who I have looked up to? And I hope I represent to all journalists out there, right? Not just Latinos and Latinas and immigrants, um, that it's a lifetime of mission, passion, hard work, and it's not easy.
Welcome to Chino Y Chicano.
I'm Matt Chan, the Chino.
I'm Enrique Cerna, the Chicano. Coming up, we're going to be talking with award-winning journalist Maria Hinojosa. In April, Washington State University's Edward R. Murrow College of Communication will honor Maria with the Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award in Journalism. She joins some of the greats in the business to receive that award, such as Walter Cronkite, Helen Thomas, Christiane Amanpour, Judy Woodruff, Ann Curry, Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, and others. Maria is the longtime host of Latino USA on NPR. She founded the nonprofit Futuro Media Group, which, along with PRX, won a Pulitzer Prize in 2022 for the podcast series Suave, that examined one man's journey into the criminal justice system. And Matt, Maria is the first Latina or Latino to win this prestigious Murrow Award, which says a lot about her career.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's done so much. And the interesting thing is she's still going. I mean, she's an active journalist and still running her business and appearing where she needs to be and telling the stories she needs to tell.
Yeah, and she's not only doing it as a journalist, but as someone running a company. She's out there beating the bushes for funding. Local journalism and journalism throughout the country is really challenged. But she's got this nonprofit organization, and they've had some tough times, but she's managed to come up with more funding to do some great work. And podcasting is something that she has really done. This award-winning work to win a Pulitzer, which is pretty incredible. All right, we're going to hear more from Maria. Here now is our conversation with Maria Hinojosa. Well, welcome, Maria Hinojosa, who I like to call La Más Chingona, big badass. Hey, congratulations so much on the WSU honor.
Oh, thank you.
It'll be a great time. I think you'll enjoy it over there, and I know that they are very honored to have you to receive the Edward R. Murrow Achievement Award. That you're in
lifetime.
Yes, yeah, and you're with the big chingones on this one.
Well, I love Edward R. Murrow. I mean, he one of my favorite movies is Good Night, Good Luck, which exposed me to him as a character. And so I feel incredibly honored. I when you say that, when you're like, you're the first Latino to ever win, and I'm like, I am? Like, I don't know if I had realized that, because the awards and recognitions are very important. I love them, but at the same time, I'm really busy being a journalist and running a nonprofit and doing the work and continuously being curious about what's the next big story that I'm going to investigate, what's the next big thing. So I don't really dwell on what the awards mean, because it goes to your head. You don't want to do that as a journalist, right? You really want to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground. But then when I have these moments where it's like, what does it feel like? It's like, is this really happening? Did I really win the Edward R. Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award, where I'm on par with journalists who I have looked up to? Like, well, I mean, I actually worked for Walter Cronkite. I wrote for him.
Really?
Christiane, I know her. Judy, I know Judy. I'm like, is this, wow. And then I get really excited and just like, yeah, very happy. And I hope I represent to all journalists out there, right? Not just Latinos and Latinas and immigrants, that it's a lifetime of mission, passion, hard work, and it's not easy. I mean, we may make it look easy, but there's always a struggle. As a journalist in the United States of America, hello.
Well, that's interesting, because it's like journalist. I think this mainstream news that's really a loose term. I think it keeps moving more towards showbiz and the politics of showbiz and the internal politics of networks and stuff, and what gets lost is the news. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the ethnic media is one of the things that may save journalism in this country,
Well,
because
100%. I believe in
yeah,
that.
and
Also because
especially
ethnic media also has faced some of the challenges that we're facing here. Like they have faced authoritarian regimes. They know how to work around this, right, so that you're not a pawn in an authoritarian regime, repeating propaganda when we shouldn't be. You know, what was some of the propaganda that was repeated over and over and over ad nauseum, creating a false impression, right? Was what Donald Trump's networks repeated over and over and over and over and over again without saying what we're about to quote here is a lie. Why do we know this? Because the data shows it. One, immigrant communities are safer than non immigrant communities. Immigrant communities are safer. Where you find a lot of immigrants, you actually find low crime. So that's a lie, Donald Trump. Also, if you look at Mexican immigrants who are committing these kinds of crimes, of course there's going to be somebody somewhere, but it is nowhere like the picture that he painted, which is a massive invasion
Mm.
of people who are badly intentioned, Mexican, writ large, all Latinos and Latinas, as immigrants. And it's a lie, because our American economy would not have been able to grow had it not been for immigrants, all immigrants, and specifically, the role of Mexican immigrants has to be recognized and hailed as something that has helped the American economy. And I'm not making this up. Like all major economists know this, including Republicans, including conservatives, like the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
So
Uh, Plus the fact that how many immigrants, the ones that he married a couple, but also that probably work on all of his properties,
yeah,
in
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 fact, it
the
was in fact, it was my colleague Benny Ley Ramirez, who used to be based in Mexico City, who tracked down the undocumented immigrants who worked for Donald Trump and had them and spoke with them. So yeah, that's exactly right. He's employed them and he knows that, well. See, I was going to say that most people understand this, right? Most people who are intelligent and have a concept of economics and business. The problem is that I don't really know what Donald Trump has a concept of in terms of economics and business, because he has gone into, he's had what, 6 failed businesses?
yeah.
6 at a minimum. And he's going to have to start selling things in order to pay back all of the legal fees that he's incurred, and the punishments for breaking the law.
He's
so
selling
what
tennis
so
shoes these days
yeah,
now.
oh my god,
They look
those
like
things.
clown
And
shoes.
talking about inflation, and yet asking $500 for a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can we get, because the Latinos represent a huge, huge voting bloc. How do we get a lot of them who vote for and support for Trump? How do we get them off that? How do we, I mean, they can't be there because they're MAGA people. I mean, I don't really understand a lot of the motivation behind it, other than maybe some of the religious beliefs. But then Donald Trump is the most unreligious person ever, right? I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's not about religion, it's anti-abortion. It's simply the main question of anti-abortion and being anti-abortion. So, let's just take a state close to you. I don't know the data of Washington State, but Idaho, for example. Um, Latinos and Latinas are one of the fastest growing population groups into Idaho. Um, and many white Americans are leaving places like California, liberal California, to move to conservative parts of Idaho. So if you're an immigrant, if you're a Mexican immigrant, and you might not have access to a lot of education or information, and you come to the States and you want to become a part of the States, you don't want to be like, like, I'm a Mexican immigrant and proud. Oh, come on, like, respect me. Like, not all Mexican immigrants are Mexican and proud the way I am, right? Because I'm a public person. I have to. So many just want to be able to fit in. Sounds like high school, right?
Yeah. Yes.
When you want to fit in, what do? You do what everybody else is doing. So in a place like Idaho, you support Donald Trump, for example, or let's see, North Dakota, where Latinos are the fastest growing demographic group also, and many of them vote, and many of them will vote for Trump, and it's kind of like I'm fitting in this way. Mississippi, for example, also where you have large influx of Latinos and Latinas. Um, so that's why, and also South Texas is a particular. Texas and the Republican Party and Latinos have a long history. Remember, there's George Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, and then George W. Bush. He had a good relationship with Latinos and Latinas. So the Republican Party has had inroads with Latinos and Latinas in Texas. And then there's Florida. And Florida is a particular place. You brought up the issue of abortion. That is right. That's one of the reasons why they will, in the evangelical community, even though they're very pro-immigrant, they will come down on the issue of anti-abortion. Even though, I mean, to say that Donald Trump is anti-abortion, it,
Yeah.
To say
so
Donald Trump is anything.
yeah, except for incredibly slippery. And I say that as a
Mhm.
journalist, like he's a slippery person.
Yeah.
We're not speaking out of turn by saying that,
I
but it
have to
has,
think.
yeah.
I was just going to say that, and I have cousins. Um, from the male side of things in the Latino community, there's this machismo that I think appeals to them,
Oh
and I
yeah,
think
sure.
that that's
Them,
a big
yeah,
part
yeah,
of
yeah.
it too. Because
There is that element of like, oh, él es el hombre, he's the
yeah,
man, he's the strong
yeah,
man. I mean, this too, in terms of parts of Asia, the Philippines. It's about the strong man. It's about a, there will be one man who is able to solve it all. It's just not the way a democracy works. We want somebody who's going to make us hopeful and believe in the possibilities of this country. But the way Donald Trump speaks is really so worrisome because it harkens back to an era which we thought was in the past.
very Hitler-like. Let's face it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Let's talk a bit about journalism today, and as you see it, from the time that I think both of us first started in this business, it has changed dramatically, and it's so fluid. Uh, you have been successful with podcasting, and why do you think that that has really worked for you, but also has become such a thing?
Well, when I formed Futuro Media in 2010, Enrique and Matt, people laughed at me because I was going to be doing radio and podcasting. And they were like, "What's that?" Like, it's insignificant. And actually, as you know, podcasting really, there was a boom. Sadly, we've seen the bust
Right.
also. I mean, the boom, it makes sense. We were all in a pandemic world. And we wanted to, we couldn't leave. So listening to podcasts, I mean, we weren't going to be able to watch TV 24/7. Listening to podcasts on our walks, it became a part of our life. Um, and audio, radio. I mean, there's a reason why I loved doing that work in public radio. It's because you're able to transport your listener in this very particular way, right? You're with the use of sound and great writing. It's very intimate. And it was intimate before we had podcasts and earbuds, right? Now it's hyper intimate, and the fact that there are like these series that you can come back to and learn and listen to people and commute and feel like you're connected to this person who's speaking to you in your ears. And then I'm not going to say we got lucky. I just think we made the right decision by forming a nonprofit, as opposed to going into this for money. That obviously has helped Futuro Media be successful. And then we have delved into TV. So I produced a frontline documentary last year about the Uvalde school massacre. So difficult issue, and the documentary is actually it's actually uplifting, if you will, because there are activists that have been born out of that tragedy, and we focus on them. And so it is part of this country, right, to take a terrible tragedy and turn it into something positive, and that's kind of what has happened in Uvalde.
Yeah.
So we're dabbling, we're releasing. We have Futuro Investigates, which does investigative work, and we have Futuro Studios that does more commercial work. And we're in the middle of dropping our next big podcast from Futuro Studios. I can't say what it is. It's with Apple. It's very top secret.
Hmm.
And then we're working on Suave podcast season 2, and Suave is what won the Pulitzer. And if the season 1 was dramatic and won the Pulitzer, season 2 is pretty dramatic. So that's coming up. So we have a lot of stuff that we're
What
doing. It's
is
very
Suave
exciting.
about?
So in 1993, when I was a correspondent at NPR, I was the only Latina correspondent at NPR, and I was asked to deliver a commencement speech for graduates inside a prison outside of Philadelphia. These were people who might be getting a high school GED, or I don't think they were giving out college degrees at that point. So I go because I'm intrigued as a journalist to be able to go inside a maximum security men's prison, and I meet a young man there. He introduces himself to me. He says, "My name is Suave. I'm a juvenile lifer." I was like, "What's that?" He said, "I was sentenced to life without parole when I was only 17." Um, and we stayed in touch. If you listen to the podcast, you'll find out that one of the main things that I did with Suave for many years was I would send him Christmas cards, because I'm a Christmas card lady, and I knew his address. I knew where he was going to be for the rest of his life, right? Fast forward to the Supreme Court taking on the question of whether or not it is cruel and inhuman punishment to sentence a juvenile to life without the possibility of parole. And they decided it is. And so that then opened the possibility for cases like Suave's to be reopened. And so Suave gets out. And that's where I'll leave it, because the whole drama of everything that happens, and it's not, we didn't win the Pulitzer because of the coverage of a person coming out of prison. We won the Pulitzer because we went straight into breaking the fourth wall and talking about the relationship between a source and a journalist. Did I get too close? What does that mean? How did it impact the story? And now we're working on season 2, and again, it's Suave's out, but there's been a lot of ups and downs. It's very dramatic, is all I can say.
Wow.
How do you walk the fine line of being a journalist and telling both sides of the story, and also, well, I mean, we just did it. We talked about Trump, and there's commentary, or do you look at that as analysis?
No, this is definitely commentary. We're commenting, but I mean, even when I'm commenting, I'm basing what I'm saying on fact.
Yeah. So
Because I'm a
when you're on Meet the Press,
journalist,
or if you're on CNN, and one
it's
of
all
their,
based
yeah,
on my reporting. It's all based on my
right.
reporting. What I'm hearing when I'm talking to sources, when I'm talking to people on the street. You know, people who know me have heard me talk about the fact that I go to a gym um, in Connecticut that has a lot of women who support Donald Trump, and so I'm actually speaking with them a lot. So but then I can give commentary, which is, um, how do we manage propaganda and mis and disinformation? But I think you're right. There is a fine line. Um, Here's the truth, though, because I always speak in the truth. Two things have happened. One, Donald Trump got elected, and the level of spewing lies and attacking immigrants, specifically Mexican immigrants and immigrants writ large, meant that other people in the world of journalism had to understand, like, because before they would say, Maria, you're crossing a line by saying these too Mexican-y things. And it's like, then we have Donald Trump, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, we have to say these things, and we have to let our colleague Maria say these things because it's the truth. It is, in fact, the truth. So that happened, and I can't remember what the second thing was, but it'll come to me. But essentially, um, things have changed. Oh, and I know what the other thing is. The other thing is that, and this is going to sound very haughty, which is why I don't say this often, but winning this number of awards and recognitions in my life as a career, as a Mexican immigrant woman, it does give me more of a possibility to speak my truth. Because I'm like, yo, I've won the Pulitzer. I've got the Lifetime Edward R. Murrow Achievement Award. I've won a Peabody. I've won 4 Emmys. I've et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am a distinguished American journalist. Therefore, my opinion has value. And I try to speak like the white men, like the way Edward R. Murrow or Walter Cronkite would speak. I mean, Walter Cronkite cried on the air, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Edward R. Murrow was a journalist of conscience. He basically lost his career for being a journalist of conscience in our country. That is our legacy. And I just feel very thankful to all the spirit gods out there that have said, we're going to give you all of these recognitions so that you can speak freely as a respected and trusted American journalist.
You got street cred.
I got the street cred.
You do.
Well,
Like,
You do. You do.
but
That's
I
no
think that's
really.
what. But I think that's what's wrong with journalism today in the mainstream journalism. It's that, whataboutism. It's like fairness equals equality of opinion and stuff. But it kind of like relegates the whole gatekeeper function to who? Because we need truth tellers.
yeah, look, it's really complicated, but I consume a lot of different kinds of journalism because that is what one should do, is to have multiple sources that you're receiving information from. That's called media literacy, right? That's what I practice, Matt. So eh, even for example, when I went viral, the one and only time that I mean, millions of views viral, is when on the air on MSNBC, I corrected somebody who was a Trump spokesperson.
Right.
And I said he used the term illegals to refer to human beings. And I said, there is no such thing as an illegal human being. Now, you may say that's your opinion. Actually, it's based on my reporting. Why? Because when I met Elie Wiesel, may he rest in peace, who survived the Holocaust and won the Nobel Peace Prize, when I met him, I asked him what he thought of the term illegal immigrant. He said, there is no such thing as an illegal human being. The first thing the Nazis did was to declare the Jews to be an illegal people. And it went downhill from there. What did this country do recently, not in our lifetime, but they declared Japanese Americans, i.e., they declared American citizens of Japanese descent to be an illegal people, to be a people so we had to have so much fear that they had to be rounded up and incarcerated against their will. Did they go willingly? Well, like you didn't really have a choice. That's why when they call it the Japanese internment, it's not a Japanese internment. It's the imprisonment of American citizens who happen to be of Japanese descent and were targeted as a result.
Yeah. Plus, let's remember too that in the 30s, Mexicans, Mexican Americans were deported from this country because.
And what is that moment called in the history books? It's called the Great Repatriation.
Yeah.
In the history books, it is labeled as the Great Repatriation. No, it was the largest forced mass exodus of people from the United States. the exodus, forced exodus, right? They were being forced
Right.
out of their
And they
country.
were American citizens, men.
So
So
many of
many.
them were
So
American
many.
citizens, and they were being removed. They were being taken from
Yeah.
Detroit, as far north as Detroit and as far south as the border. It was a horrible moment in our country. Thank you so much for bringing it up. But who were the first people who were excluded by law
The
from this country?
Chinese.
Yeah.
Chinese
Chinese.
women.
Yeah.
Chinese women. It starts with the Chinese women and a false narrative that they were prostitutes, sex workers. Untrue. Not true.
Yeah.
They were coming to meet their husbands and their partners who were working on the railroad. They were just like my mom coming to meet my dad. So, and then it was the Chinese Exclusion
Yeah.
Act. So yes,
See, and these are the stories that, okay, many of us as people of color, we need to tell, and we have been telling, but
Well, we need to
reminding
tell it to our own people.
our own people as well, to remind them, our young people, to know these things as well. Uh, that's why you need to have a diverse newsroom. That's why I think it's so great to see so many young journalists that I see that are Latino, that are bilingual and are able to go into community and have a conversation, get people, our folks, if you speak Spanish, they go, oh, okay, hey, I'll talk to you. No, it's like,
Yeah.
there's this thing, and that's a very important thing.
Well, an instant familiarity.
Yeah. Hey,
Because it says more. It's culture. It's everything.
yeah. Well, because of time here, I know, Maria, you got to go, but there's a couple of things I want to address. You've had to deal with the economics of running a business, and that is that you had to lay some folks off. How tough was that?
oh my God, it was the worst moment in my professional life. Not journalistically, like not journalistically. Although when you lay off journalists, it's a terrible moment in journalism. It was terrible. It was horrible. Yeah, it was a very, very low point, but I immediately decided that we were going to touch the ground and we were going to come back. And I told my team, I'm labeling this moment the Futuro Phoenix, the Phoenix Futuro moment. And you may have seen on my social media, I just recently put out a thank you because I made a commitment. We were going to make it in the black at the end of the year because of the layoffs, but I wanted to show everyone and myself that the love for Futuro as a legacy organization is real. And so I raised $1 million. And then I started 2024 and I said, I have to leave the trauma of what happened in 2023 behind. I can't carry that with me. I have to think about what's next in 2024. And so it was horrible. And I remember it. I talk about it a lot. I think about it a lot, like how dark those times were. And yet getting up every morning and just like, come on, let's go. Let's do this. Let's fight for this, because I'm not going to give up Futuro Media because we had a bad financial spell. I looked to Frederick Douglass, whose statue is 4 blocks from my house here in Harlem. I'm like, you had terrible days too. You had terrible business moments. You were born an enslaved man. Come on. But you didn't give up. And so that's kind of how my motto is. I understood the importance of our work and our legacy. So I was like, I'm not going to let this take me down, and it's not going to take Futuro down. And I never, ever, ever, ever want to be in that situation again, nor I mean, I want to say, it's hard to say never, but I don't plan on being in that situation ever again. It was terrible. Thank you so much for asking, Enrique.
Well,
No,
because you were
running
in
a business.
well, Matt ran a business. He was he had his own
Running a
production
business is tough because you have your product or your mission, right? But you also have the added burden that people are relying on you for their livelihoods,
Yeah.
their mortgages, the schooling, the education of their children.
So
That
hard.
weighs heavy.
Oh my God.
I was
Like
a supervisor. I was a supervisor once, and I had to lay off or reduce the hours of 13 people. Awful day. And awful day, because among those people were people that I considered friends. And they were pissed at me, and I was, what can you do? You're going to come to WSU, receive this great award, but to me, it's always about the students. So what are you what are you going to say to them? What do you want them to understand about this business of ours? Sound like a mafia guy. This thing of ours. Yeah.
This
Okay.
business of
Yeah. Yeah.
well, that that if you feel the passion, you have to have passion. You really have to have passion and understand the mission. And again, I didn't know until later in my career this understanding of like the work that we do is tied to Frederick Douglass, tied to Ruben Salazar, tied to these great journalists who opened the doors for us. So you got to feel that passion and that connection to mission because you're going to have some tough days. You're going to you may end up working in the corporate media and I have a son who works in the corporate media, so I think that's fine, but it doesn't mean it's going to be all great. We are still dealing, if you're a journalist of conscience, and you don't have to be a journalist of color to be a journalist of conscience, but if you are a journalist of conscience and a journalist of color, you're going to have you're going to have to punch up, you know, because we are not overwhelmingly the owners of the means, right? Right. So we will often have an editorial level that's above us that is going to feel controlling. We know this, right? So I just say keep at it. Refine your work, refine the mission. I mean, you have to have this profound curiosity that has to be your guidepost, right? That thing that moves you has got to be like, well, how did we get here? Like Matt said, well, how did Latinos end up voting for Donald Trump? Let me try and understand this. So the eternal curiosity is so important, and then respecting our mission. So yeah,
Yeah.
I hope to inspire other journalists. That is my hope because we need them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's journalism has become more of a calling than a job.
Well, yeah. I mean, we have to be able to pay our bills, right?
Ah, yes, of
So
course.
no, ideally we want journalists to have jobs. And there is a big effort right now, as you know, to put funding into local journalism, led by the MacArthur Foundation. It's called the Press Forward Initiative. So there is going to be more money for local journalists. And I'm really excited about that. It's not perfect. And it's a hustle. I'm always hustling. It's never easy. It's never like, oh, let me just relax. And no, it's like a constant hustle. But then there's like phenomenal payoff.
Yeah.
Big things are going to be announced for 2024 for Futuro Media. So you just got to stay watching with us because things are going to get really interesting in a positive way.
Let's stay tuned. And you're going to have an opportunity to talk to Latino students. And I think one of the things that I think to me is so important is for them to see someone like you, someone like them in the position of you. Um, what does that mean to you to be able to do that?
Oh my God, I love that. I love that because I didn't have someone to look up to who looked like me. I didn't. And I love the fact that there's a tangible, like, oh my God, she actually exists. She did it. She talks honestly about what it takes. Eh, and and I remember when at one point very early in my career, it was such a thing because of the way I said my name. Maria Hinojosa, and people were like scandalized, like, "Oh my God, she said it in Spanish." Maria Hinojosa, say it in English, what? And it was such a scandal at NPR at the time, and I just remember thinking, well, maybe I'll inspire just one journalist to say their name the way they want to. The beauty of this is that I know I have inspired much more than just one, and much more than just beyond how they want to say their name. And this thought just makes me feel like, oh, how cool. But ultimately, you're alone. Like, I'm alone. Like, I'm in my studio. I'm alone in my small home studio. I don't have 10,000 people who I've inspired right with me. So you're alone too. And it can feel lonely. And that's sometimes the nature of our job, which is why you gotta be tough and not give up and understand why we do this.
All three of us know that. And I know that Matt and I do, because we were, those guys that came into the business and like, there's nobody that looks like us. And so, but you just persevere. I think if you really
and I
love
think
it and
now
you go for it.
it's our duty to teach people what happened.
Yeah.
And bring them along.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we got to be chingons and chingonas. There we go. So there you go.
Chingones y chingonas.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, we know you got to go. So
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
I'm actually going to do physical therapy because I have a
Oh,
little
really?
bit of tendonitis.
Ah,
Because on top of everything else, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I'm a boxer.
Yeah.
And so, and boxing is like my life. And so I'm battling with tendonitis so that I can go back to boxing and not feeling any pain. So I appreciate the time, and I'm really nice to see you, Enrique. Nice to meet you, Matt. And I am looking forward to coming to your neck of the woods. I
All right.
can't wait. I'm so honored. So honored.
Thanks so much. You take care, and we'll see you in Pullman.
See you in Pullman.
Adios.
Ciao.
the Chino Y Chicano podcast is available on your favorite podcast provider.
You can watch the video version on YouTube, and Converge Media, a leading producer of culturally relevant content in the Pacific Northwest. We'll talk more later.